So now I urged you at the beginning to think up questions. It's always a mistake to wait to the end to think up questions. You think, oh my God, I've got to ask a question. Oh my God. What? Yeah, or a question or a statement, I don't care.
Nech sa páči. Počujete na mikrofón. A poprosím, povedzte či v slovenčine alebo angličtine, aby sme...
In English. Go ahead, Derek.
So you were talking about...
Yeah, it's in English, I know, but I'm going to keep these out in case someone starts saying something.
Thank you for your time. So you ended your speech with talking about change. And there is a very big change happening on the planet right now. It's climate change, and how do you integrate climate change into your views about capitalism?
Well, I agree that there's climate change. Donald Trump doesn't believe it. He also doesn't believe in the Apostles' Creed, it turns out. He pretends to be a Presbyterian, and he doesn't. God, just one thing after another. But anyway. I believe it's caused by humans. I believe that it's CO2. I believe that we've got to do something about it. And I think we can. One thing we can do is what the rioters in France are rioting against. Charge a carbon tax. That's what they're complaining about, by the way. Oh, raise the price of petrol. Oh, no, that's what we need to do. We need to have a carbon tax, country by country, and as much as possible in countries like China and India as well, but certainly in places like Slovakia and the United States. And that's one way to do it. That'll give incentives to think up ways to get carbon, get CO2, it's not carbon exactly, but CO2, out of the fuel supply, and it'll give incentives for people to invent carbon capture technologies, which now are not economical, but could be, and to move to substitutes like solar energy. So it's actually rather simple.
And do you think it's possible to have capitalism without economic growth?
Without economic growth?
Because economic growth is the reason why we have an increase in CO2 because of the increased amount of production.
Look.
And this is joining the tragedy of the commons. Everyone having the free will don't realize they are exhausting the resources, and therefore...
I understand. But what? You're to keep China and India poor? That's unethical. China, which is doing quite well, has an income per head about a third of Slovakia. It's still very poor. What we're to, because we're to stop economic growth, is that your solution? No. We should let economic growth, that is ingenuity, innovism, keep going. And part of the innovism will be carbon capture. How do I know that? How can I be so confident? Because it's happened over and over and over again. Whale oil was once a major source of light in upper income houses in the West. The whale oil was running out. Turns out, by the way, the whales are smarter than we thought they were. And instead of going to investigate whale ships when they came in, they ran away from them. They learned to run away from them. But anyway, whale oil was becoming more and more expensive. And then someone said, how about this stuff that keeps coming out of the ground in Pennsylvania? Maybe we can burn that. And pretty soon we had kerosene. So every time, let's take a case of land. Land is limited. God's not making any more of it except for the Dutch. They make more of it. But most places are not making more land. So it's fixed in supply. Well, we're screwed. What's going to happen? Huh? He invented artificial fertilizers. He invented dwarf varieties of wheat, corn, and rice. And income per head in farms, that is productivity on farms, increased in the United States from 1800 to the present, hear this, by 200 times. American farms are 200 times more productive than they were in 1800. So I see no reason to stop economic growth. Resources are mainly about human ingenuity. The ultimate resource, as a famous economist said, is our brain, is our intelligence for dealing with problems. I have great optimism about China and India, who are producing by the millions engineers, entrepreneurs, biologists. I look forward to much higher income in the world. I look forward to all the world having a standard of living equal to that of Luxembourg. And that will be good, not bad. That will not be an environmental catastrophe. We'll solve it. Solar energy alone could take care of this.
Nech sa páči, kto ďalší? Pán.
Po slovensky. Súhlasím s vami so všetkým, čo ste povedali. Moja otázka znie, či veríte tomu, že tento ekonomický, kapitalistický alebo etický kapitalizmus sa dokáže zbaviť tzv. Sociopatov. My ľudové to nazývame predátorov alebo parazitov.
The main parasites are governors, the state. I mean, Orban in Hungary was a terrible man. He was once a liberal. Orban, this guy next door. If you mean free riders, people who won't work, is that what you mean? People who won't work?
More like that.
What? What? Donald Trump, oh well. I look forward to seeing Donald Trump in an orange jumpsuit with shackles, chains on his hands and legs so he can't run away. The great thing about Donald Trump is he's stupid and he's lazy. If he was as intelligent and energetic as Putin, we would all be, you too, would be in deep trouble. So, look, we need to work on our politics. We need to work on avoiding populism, avoiding the politics of envy. That's one of our main problems, I think, is envy. You know, everyone in this room I can be envious of for something. Many of you speak Slovak and English. I speak only English. Come on. I envy you. Many of you are smarter than I am. Some of you even are more beautiful than I am. But you see, envy cannot be satisfied. So envy can't be the basis of social policy. So we've got to get away from that kind of politics. That's called populism.
A question will be in English. What's your view about central bank, especially in quantitative easing? Is innovation, or it can solve some problems?
Well, I'm a free market person. I'm a liberal, a loving liberal. And I believe that central banks are a bad idea. I don't think the government should control the money supply. Now, in the modern world, governments don't do a very good job at doing that anyway. In my country, the Federal Reserve Bank is the central bank. And the journalists and many of the economists think that it controls the money supply or controls the interest rate. And I'm of the view that that's silly. The interest rate is determined by the supply and demand for loanable funds in the world. The supply and demand of borrowing and investing amounts in the world. And that is largely determined nowadays by the very high savings rates of the Chinese. That's why interest rates are so low in the world. It has nothing to do with the European Central Bank or the American Central Bank. Their portfolios are too small to change this. So I think we do much better with private money supplies, such as we've had in the past. So I think the whole business banks go away. To hell with central banks. Fire all the economists, send them away. Send them away so they do something useful.
Okay, thank you for your lecture. Professor McCloskey, and I want to ask, as you said, socialism is popular, and also among young people. And so my question is there some bourgeois culture in the West, and how to wake it up?
Well, yeah, there's a bourgeois culture in the West. As Schumpeter said, Joseph Schumpeter, there was, in the late 19th century, late 1800s in Europe, there had come to be, even in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a business-respecting civilization, which then got off track in the 20s and 30s. And I think that's the key. It's not so much the behavior of the individual business people as the attitude of the rest of the society towards them. If you think, as is commonly the case in Central and Eastern Europe, that people in business are robbers and that they get rich by taking stuff from other people, and indeed, if they do, then you can't have an economy that's going to work very well, because there's going to be this suspicion. The government, people will get the government to attack the bourgeoisie, and it's all not going to work very well. So there has to be what I call the bourgeois revaluation, which happened in Britain, for example, in the 1700s, where the British came to be a business-respecting civilization. You can see that in the contrast between Shakespeare around 1600 and Jane Austen, the novelist, around 1800. Shakespeare has no bourgeois heroes, none. Even the Merchant of Venice, Antonio, is a fool for love. All the heroes, Henry IV, Henry V, etc., they're all either aristocrats or magicians. Whereas in Austen, she wasn't bourgeois, she was gentry. She portrays the bourgeoisie as normal people. She had a brother who was a banker in London. So that's the change that you need. And in Eastern Europe, and Central Europe too, there's this deep suspicion How to change it? That's something the artists can do. The filmmakers, the musicians, rock musicians, journalists, especially the artists. So if there are any artists here, get to work. I'd like to hear a female voice. Is there a woman here?
Next question.
I would like to ask,
She's next.
okay. I would like to ask you, since you were talking about security versus liberalism, what do you think about thousands or maybe 10,000s of people that are trying to come to the United States right now from countries like Honduras, Guatemala and other, and want to cross US border? Can they be part of this liberalism? Because
Yes.
I think some of them should be part of the United States.
Certainly so. I'm in favor of free migration. My people came under free migration. I don't know why I should slam the door on these people. There aren't actually very many of them. That's what's so irritating about Donald Trump's xenophobia. I was in Hungary 2 weeks before the last election. And there was all this talk about the Muslims coming from Syria and how terrible that would be. Now wait a second. The Muslims were going to come to Hungary to learn Hungarian? Are you crazy? They were on their way to Germany. Pass them through, let the Germans deal with them. German is a much easier language to learn as an adult than Hungarian. So the whole thing's crazy. No, I think that, and this is very unpopular, but I think I'm really against national borders. I think the whole thing is absurd, but you know, that's a very radical position. And you say, oh well, that wouldn't work, and blah blah blah. But most of the arguments against it are quite silly. Look, we in the United States have had a lot of experience with free migration, and it works very well. By the third generation, if not the second, the offspring of the migrants are acting just like other Americans, if you think that's a good thing to do. They're playing baseball, they're singing American rock music, they're telling jokes about Saturday Night Live. You know, come on. So I think, and in any case, here's an economist's argument. If you believe in free trade in goods, so far as the economics is concerned, you ought to be in favor of free trade in people, too. Because economically, let's set aside the cultural worries. Economically, they have identical effects. Either you can work with Juan Valdez at arm's length, he stays in Colombia, trades with you, or you can bring Juan Valdez to the United States and he trades with you. They're the same economic effect. I know that's too radical for most people, but I wanted to hear a female voice. No, I don't want to have any other man.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we all can agree, or most of us who are here, that the socialism, as it was developed in most countries, didn't work. It failed. But what about the love and liberalism? Which country would you think that is really developing love and liberalism, or which country will, in the future, according to you, develop it?
Well, here's my point. The progress we've made comes from the liberal parts of countries. People often hold up Scandinavia as a socialist paradise. Now this is very, I've lived in Sweden, I know a little bit about it. That's not right. Sweden is a capitalist country. It's a free market country. Most prices in Sweden are determined by supply and demand. It's easy to set up a business in Sweden. There's some regulation, but it's not as bad as in most countries. There's a safety net, yes. But there's a safety net in the United States, too, which is usually thought of as a terribly liberal country in my terms. So I've come to this in the last few days, actually. In talking to people, I've got to get them to understand that it's the liberal parts of the country that do well for us. Let's take China. People say, well, what about China? That's the illiberal country that seems to be doing very well. My answer to them is that the illiberal parts of China, the government namely, the Communist Party, are doing very badly and will keep on doing badly because authoritarian big governments do a lousy job in most things. My example is this crazy system they have in China of high-speed rail all over the country. I've ridden on it. It's crazy. It has to be subsidized enormously. It's terribly expensive. It's something a poor country shouldn't be doing, and very few rich countries should do. That's the government. What works in China, what's made ordinary Chinese much better off, is the shop or the factory, right? It's the liberal parts. The Communist Party stopped forcing everyone to do stupid things in 1978 and let them do it. Allowed them to profit. Allowed them. So there's no 100% liberal country. Probably the closest for a while was Hong Kong. Now Hong Kong is run by the Chinese, but even then it didn't have any vote at all. So from the political point of view, it was illegal. It was a crown colony of Britain. But it was a very free economy. And in 30 years, Hong Kong went, despite enormous migration from the mainland, from a place with a Somalian standard of living to a place with a U.S. standard of living. That's in 30 or 40 years. So the dynamic parts, and it's very unsurprising in terms of what I've said, the dynamic parts of an economy, the economy where good change is happening and making ordinary people better off, is the liberal part. And often, although not in every respect, but often, the part that's not working and is making people worse off is the illiberal part, the government part.
Thanks. Ďalší, nech sa páči. Pán v strede.
Thank you for the lecture.
Welcome.
It seems to me that as automatization of labor, also possibly mental labor in the future, will make most of the population across the world unemployable.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but yeah, that's what
yeah. And it seems to me that if the current system persists, we are risking growth in gap, wealth gap. Do you have any idea of how this can be addressed?
It's all wrong. Don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. The newspaper is filled with AI anxieties. Oh God, everyone's going to be unemployed. Go to my website. I've got an article, a short article in Reason magazine about technological unemployment. Technological unemployment, I hear this, has never happened. Never once in the history of humankind has a development caused large-scale unemployment. Now, wait. It does cause local unemployment. No question about it. Once, every elevator had an elevator operator. Right? You're not old enough to remember that. Once there was a person pressing buttons and working. Now no longer. As recently as 2000, in Slovakia, there were hundreds of video stores. I take it, in Slovakia, now there are 0 video stores. So those people are unemployed, temporarily. They go to other jobs every single time. Here's why it makes, there are a whole bunch of reasons why what she said makes no sense at all. Here's one number that you should all keep in mind. Every year in a changing, innovative economy, which includes Slovakia, here it is. 1 out of every 7 jobs disappears forever. 1 out of every 7 jobs disappears forever. Now, one way this happens is that a coffee shop goes bankrupt. And then the people who once worked in the coffee shop, sorry, I can't pay you anymore, go somewhere else, and they do. Or, let's take a more sharp case, Uber is invented. Uber is invented and the taxi drivers go out of business. I don't know the story here. Have you made Uber illegal as they have in Germany? Yeah, now that's smart. That's good. An innovation that puts thousands of automobiles at the convenience of ordinary people on the streets of Bratislava. And people say, oh no, we don't want that. We want to protect the current taxi drivers. That's a terrible idea, but it's happening all over the world. Okay. What 1/7 go away? The spectacular case is agriculture. 90% of the Slovak population in 1800 were on farms. 80% in the United States. Now it's 3 or 4% in Slovakia, under 2% in the United States. Those jobs went away forever. They just vanished. And yet, we don't have 90% unemployment. If the logic of technological employment made any sense at all, which it doesn't, everyone would be unemployed. Almost everyone. So there's obviously something terribly wrong with this whole idea. So, there's an English word that was popular in the 18th century. Cant. Not Kant, Immanuel Kant, but Cant. C-A-N-T. It's a somewhat unusual word. It means conventional opinions, frequently repeated, that are thoughtlessly wrong. Cant. And as Dr. Samuel Johnson, the great 18th century writer and speaker, said to his friends, clear your mind of Cant. Right? Don't suppose that just because it keeps being repeated on television, that something's correct. Clear your mind of Cant. No, not Cant.
Yeah.
Not Kant. Kant's okay, but not Cant.
You said in your lecture that what makes any system ethical is the availability of choice, and I subscribe to that statement 100%.
There you go, free will.
Then what is your assessment of society, modern society we are living in today? Because my concern, based on my personal experience from last maybe 20 years, is that our legislative framework, and by our I mean Slovak, European, American legislative framework is increasingly prohibitive and prescriptive, leaving or providing fewer and fewer options for free choice.
I completely agree.
And it is, in my view, a trend that is to a certain extent unnoticed even by some part of free marketeers.
I completely
or
agree.
Or it is at least underestimated.
I completely agree with you. There are over 1,000 occupations in the United States now that require a government license. 1,000. Hair braiding. I'm not making this up. Hair braiding. It's a common in the African American community to do very nice hair braiding. Maybe I should do hair braiding. But anyway, it takes a long time. It's rather complicated. But to do it, you have to have a license. This is insane. And the argument is always safety. That's the official argument for all of this stuff. And, of course, its real explanation is monopoly. If you're a hair braiding expert, you want to stop competitors. So you get the government to implement licensing. You're quite right that the impulse of parliaments to pass new laws, parliaments, the Duma, considers itself successful if it passes 1,000 new laws this session. Ah, how wonderful. More exercises of the fist on every detail of human life. And it's a very unhealthy situation. And I'm a little bit unclear what to do about it, because I believe in democracy. I'm a Democrat, small d. But on the other, there are tons of examples of this. One is the Mickey Mouse law in copyright, American copyright. In 1998, the copyright on the image of Mickey Mouse was about to expire. 50 years after the death of the creator, namely Walt Disney. So, the Walt Disney Corporation, the image of Mickey Mouse is a very valuable item, went to the United States Congress and purchased it for a surprisingly low price. Campaign contributions, nice trips abroad, or something. So, the American copyright for everyone, not just Mickey Mouse, was increased by 20 years. So now instead of it being 50 years, which is ridiculous, it's now 70 years. This just goes on and on. You tell me what to do. We have to have parliaments. But they do tend to exercise their power. Power tends to corrupt. I don't know what to do. Is that?
What about
another woman over there?
It is.
Good.
And an older woman.
Old woman, that's me too here.
And an old American woman.
There you are. From where?
I'm from Seattle, Washington, but I'm living in Bratislava now. I left America when Trump was elected.
Good for you. I'm staying to fight the good fight, but
Thank you. Thank you. My question is, if you could advise a world leader, I won't name any names, but a world leader, around how to curb income inequality.
Yeah.
What are two or three things you would advise that world leader to do to help solve the problem of income inequality, which seems to be somewhat of a result of capitalism run amok?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No. Al contrario, they say in Italy. No, it's not capitalism run amok. If anything, it's crony capitalism run amok. It's not, or maybe you could call it capitalism run amok. But I'm against crony capitalism. I'm against such as in the Russian Federation. No. Actually, the thing that I just talked about, licenses, obstacles to starting a business, and so on, those make for inequalities. Let's take an example that you and I are very familiar with, the crazy system of healthcare in the United States. I've come to the conclusion that the way to solve it, or at least the radical proposal, is to get rid of all the monopolies. The drug company monopolies, the hospital monopolies, the nurse monopolies, and most of all, the doctor monopolies. Why can't Americans buy drugs in Canada? Why can't Americans buy surgeons in Slovakia? Why can't French-trained doctors work in the United States? That would instantly make healthcare cheaper in the United States. And doctors would not be these kind of elite millionaires they are now. On the other hand, inequality that's caused by innovation, Bill Gates or something, actually Steve Jobs is a better example, is not something I object to. That someone else is a better singer than I am and becomes a rock star or an opera singer and makes a lot of money, I have no objection to. I pay her voluntarily. What's the beef? It's called, in ethical philosophy, it's called the Wilt Chamberlain example. Wilt Chamberlain was a famous basketball player, and you pay Wilt Chamberlain to watch him, I don't know, do jump shots or whatever he did. And you pay voluntarily, he gets the money, he ends up being a multimillionaire. So what? Unless we base our social policy on envy, so what? I don't care. Wilt's rich, so what? I don't care. I have a long review of Piketty's book, 50-page review that I wrote, which you can read. And there are a lot of problems with that book. I'm not contemptuous of it. He's a serious man, and I don't think he's a bad man or anything. But it's wrong. It's deeply wrong. Here's an interesting fact. Worldwide, it is not true that inequality is increasing. On the contrary, worldwide, it's decreasing. If you treat each individual as an observation and do I don't know, a Gini coefficient or anything else you want, it's just a technical term, you'll find that it's inequality is gigantically fallen in the last 30 or 40 years.
In America?
In the world. I was careful about that, in the world. But in America, it hasn't increased very much. It's a myth. It's part of this cant of the newspapers and TV. They keep saying it over and over again. They say that income of poor people hasn't increased. Yes, it has. There are a whole bunch of sort of mythologies that get going, and then people worry about them, and are willing to bring in the fist to fix them. Whereas the best way to have an equal and free society is to leave people alone. Help them, loving liberalism. Help them when they need it. I'm very willing to be taxed to pay for elementary education. Not that it be supplied through the government. I'm not willing to do that. But I'm willing to pay for it. But I'm not willing to be taxed to pay for a lot of things the government does, like enormous subsidies to cotton farmers or sugar farmers.
On the right side,
Ah, yes.
Thank you. I would like to ask you about
challenges that the European Union will face, or maybe is already, and how will they shape our future, and taking into consideration also the rising population of, or popularity of extremist or populist parties?
Well, the populism, as you know, is not confined to the EU. It's worldwide. In Brazil, there's just been an election of a populist guy, Bolsonaro. The Philippines is this lunatic who kills people who have drugs. Worldwide, and then we have our own lunatic in the United States. Populist parties, you look, I wish the EU, I wish the EU had stuck with the Treaty of Rome, which recommended free trade in commodities. I wish they hadn't tried to do further integration. I think that aroused the populism. These crazy arguments that the Muslims are coming and so on. That comes from migration policy. In my opinion, I'm not EU citizen, unfortunately. So I'm just offering an outsider's opinion here. It probably would have been better to just go with free trade. I think if you can avoid fascism, such as in Hungary, then the future is bright. But fascism is fascism. When the Hungarian state recommends that students in universities report on professors who talk in favor of liberalism, then you know you're in trouble. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen in Slovakia. And I'm hoping the Hungarians come to their senses. One thing the EU could do is stop their subsidies to agriculture in Hungary. That'd be a good idea. See how they like that? Their language is impossible, their politics is too. Actually, there is the great Enrico Fermi, an Italian, great Italian physicist who lived in the United States as well. He and a bunch of physicists, including Hungarians, were standing around thinking, are there other intelligent beings in the universe? And Fermi fell silent for a while. He said, he made this following remark. He said, well, if there are, where are they? Which, when you think about it, is a very intelligent remark. Because if there are all these intelligent people around, the universe is very old, 14 billion years old, there'd be time for them to develop, to come to us. And a Hungarian physicist smiled and said to Enrico, but Enrico, they're already here. They're just called Hungarians.
One more question coming back to the migration and the populism.
Yeah.
Maybe there are some estimates, not estimates, but real numbers that in Africa there will be some 2 billion, now which is approximately 1 billion people, if I'm not mistaken. 2030 should be 2 billion, and the worst scenario or the maximum scenario will be 6 billion in 2010.
Yeah.
What do you think? What will happen in Africa?
Well,
regarding Europe, of course, because we are the closest.
I can tell you what's going to happen. I have a crystal ball. What is happening in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is that it is developing economically. And in Nigeria, for example, it's starting to grow considerably. Botswana is a great success. In a number of other places, things are going well. They've gotten over some of their bad governance period. But we Europeans can't brag about our wonderful governments that caused the First and Second World War and the Holocaust and communism and other wonderful, it's not as if we're so vastly superior to those poor black people. We're as barbarous as we sometimes think they are. But anyway, I think Sub-Saharan Africa has a great economic future. And there's a strange reason for this. The Sub-Saharan African population, and this isn't some crazy idea of mine, it's well known, has much more genetic variability than all other Homo sapien populations because of what's known as the founder effect in genetics. That small groups of our ancestors came out of Africa. Everyone here, I'm looking around, I don't see any Orientals or people from East Asia, but everyone here, your ancestors came out of Africa 70,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, and turned left. That's what happened. Everyone here is in Africa. Indeed, they're starting to realize that about 8,000 years ago, all of us were black. The reason we got white is vitamin D deficiency. If you don't get enough vitamin D from the sun, you get sick. So we got white. Okay. So the people who stayed have more genetic variability. The naturally tallest people in the world, the naturally shortest people in the world are Sub-Saharan Africans. The fastest sprinters in the world are West Africans. The fastest long-distance runners are East Africans. That's just an example. So in 50 or 100 years, when Africa is as rich as Europe is, as it will be, all the geniuses are going to be black. And this is going to be, I wish I could live long enough to see it, because this is going to make East Asian or European racism look extremely stupid. When the Einsteins and the Mozarts are all black. Yes!
Posledná otázka, last question, ľavo, prvý vzadu. Žiaľ, náš čas sa pomaly blíži k koncu, takže last question, posledná otázka.
Thank you very much for your lecture, Professor McCloskey. As you mentioned already, subsidies to agriculture, I would like to just ask a short question on that. We have our common agricultural policy here in Europe. Your agriculture is also greatly subsidized. It seems to me that we are as if one step behind you. The measure you left behind is inefficient. We are adopting at the moment here, and we also have evidence of countries which does not have any subsidies at all, and we are still keeping this path of inefficiency, obvious inefficiency. And my question is, why is it so, and how can we just... It's for me completely irrational, but it's happening not only in agriculture, also in other...
It's a terrible problem. We have it in the United States too. What should be happening is that you should be getting your food and fiber from Africa. And if you did so, it would improve the situation of African farmers and reduce the amount of migration sharply, very sharply. It's been calculated that if the common agricultural policy were abandoned and you started to import cotton from Sahel or fruit from elsewhere in Africa, it would increase the income of farmers directly, not through their damn governments, but farmers directly, 10 times more than all the foreign aid that comes to Africa from Europe. 10 times more. So it's vastly smarter. It would make Africa prosperous. It would make you not be anxious about all these black people coming, although why you are, I don't know. We've had black people in the United States, doesn't seem to bother us. Okay, and the same thing's true of the United States. We should be getting all our food and fiber from Central America, the place that's causing this panic, this ridiculous panic that Trump has stirred up about these terrible pregnant women and small children who are coming to invade our country. And can you think of a worse thing than a bunch of 3-year-olds coming to invade your country? I'm appalled by the whole idea. That if we got all our food and if we stopped subsidizing sugar, cotton, and tons of other things, the whole situation would be much better. So the solution is free trade. The reason we still have the common agricultural policy and the loony American subsidies to agriculture is politics. And I think it's the same here as it is there, but I'm not sure of the details. But in the United States, every state has 2 senators, regardless of their population. So North Dakota is the least populous state in the United States. It's a big state, but it has very few people. It gets 2 United States senators. They make beet sugar, not cane sugar, they're too far north, but they make beet sugar. So surprise, surprise, the 2 United States senators in North Dakota support the high price of sugar in the United States. The United States has paid 2 times the world price of sugar for many, many years. It's true here. In Hungary, for example, the reason that the last election turned out as it did is that rural Hungarians are vastly overrepresented. That's true in the United States too. And so you get this crazy result. Let me tell one more joke. The Department of Agriculture has a lot of bureaucrats. And the joke goes this way. A man visits the Department of Agriculture in the United States. And the number of farmers in the United States is falling and falling and falling. And his host takes him into this enormous room with thousands of Department of Agriculture functionaries. And he's very impressed by how many there are. He says, wow. Then over in the corner he notices one of the Department of Agriculture people is on his desk weeping, crying, inconsolable. He's terribly sad. And the man says, why is this man crying? And his host says, his farmer died. Here's a true fact. There are more people employed in the French department that takes care of subsidies and regulation of films than are employed in the French film industry.
This is a very good conclusion. Thank you very much. So I would like once more to express thanks. Ja pevne verím, že stretneme sa opäť o niekoľko mesiacov do ďalšej prednášky a ešte raz ďakujeme našim partnerom za spoluprácu. Thank you very much for all. Goodbye.